How you doing, Jack?
Hey, there we go. So, Benz, walk us through this move, and it's such a brilliant masterstroke here because President Trump is skipping all over, I think, the steps that were actually obstacles to the peace process and saying, you know what, I'm going to deal with this one myself.
Well, the biggest obstacles to the peace process are right here in Washington, D.C., which is why I think
Yes.
it's fitting to have this in the most remote part of the United States, as well as quite adjacent to Kamchatka in Russia. This is famously the place that Sarah Palin said she could look out her back door and see Russia. So it's almost like
Sarah
a
Palin
common
totally
meeting ground.
vindicated, by the way.
Yes.
Sarah Palin has been totally
Yes.
vindicated.
But Trump's great opponents in trying to strike peace have not been Putin, or I would argue even Zelensky, but rather the phalanx of blob corps, sort of army corps from the blob, who are on both sides of the Atlantic, from the legacy DC internationalist mafia together with the transatlantic side of the NATO cabal, who have tried to sabotage the peace process at every turn. Folks remember right before the previous round of peace talks with Russia and Ukraine, Mike Pompeo traveled over to Ukraine, gave a speech about the need to unsettle the peace process by attacking Putin, and the very next day, the largest attack on Russia's territory was set off by Ukraine, which scuttled the peace process. So you have this core of folks who make their living off of war with Russia, off of seizing assets from Eurasia, who do not want peace, certainly do not want peace under the terms that Trump, I think, would be willing, which include giving up land in Ukraine. The fact is that land in Ukraine that Russia has seized has been under a coup government for 11 years. It was the Obama administration's toppling, the overthrow of the democratically elected government of Ukraine in 2014 that caused Eastern Ukraine, which is majority Russian ethnic, to break away. What would we do in the United States in that situation if a foreign government toppled our own and then one side of our country broke away and did not respect the new coup government? I mean, that was what happened here. And so Ukraine sort of ceased to become Ukraine after the 2014 Maidan coup. It became a NATO owned Western half and a Russia affinity Eastern half. So the seizing of this land, which frankly is not even all that great a territorial dominion, is something that I think Putin is bent on. He does not want to give up land for peace now that he controls that land. And what good is giving that back anyway? As soon as a Democrat gets in power, or as soon as a Nikki Haley Republican gets in power, they're going to try to seize that land. They're going to use that land to build NATO missiles on. We know that Ukraine is still ostensibly on a path to NATO accession. NATO has made no promises that it would not fold Ukraine into NATO. In fact, they're moving ahead with it. And even if they did promise it, who in the right mind would believe it after all of the lies that NATO has told about stopping expansion? So, with that all said, I think that the only path to peace is through Ukraine giving up land that it frankly should not have taken through a 2014 coup and left the entire eastern state helpless. I mean, the eastern Ukrainians were being murdered by American military muscle that was being thrown from 2014 to 2022 at the Ukrainian military in order to seize that back. So Trump needs to conduct these negotiations in peace, in tranquility, and in Alaska.
And it's so symbolic. Alaska, of course, originally discovered by the Russians, as a matter of fact, all the way back in the 1700s. And I've always said that America is a country that was founded amongst empires. So the Russian Empire was on the continent of North America, as well as the Spanish. Everyone knows the British. The French were here all the way up through the French, what eventually became the Louisiana Purchase. And so you just see empire after empire. The Dutch, even had, many holdings in New York City. And so the fact that you're having it in this place where, and of course, by the way, the Russian Orthodox Church, most of the natives up in Alaska are in fact Russian Orthodox. And so this is something where a lot of people will be asking, why are they doing it up there? But it makes a lot of sense for a number of reasons. Also, which we're coming up on a break here real quick. Also, which because there is that ICC warrant out for Putin regarding the Ukraine war. But the United States, of course, famously does not uphold ICC warrants, does not enforce them. And so, of course, this is a country that he actually can travel to without having to worry about any of the legal framework that the ICC would run into. That, of course, prevented him from attending some of the BRIC summits like the one in Brazil recently. Mike Benz, walk us through some of the ideas that we've been hearing for, we haven't gotten quite a full readout of what the offers are going to be when it comes to the negotiations here. Russia, I think, of course, pushing for all 4 of the contested oblasts. J.D. Vance saying yesterday that, they'd be looking for basically a ceasefire along the line of contact, which would not include the entirety of all 4 of the oblasts. And I think there's a new phrase that's been going around talking this idea of de facto recognition of Russian control of these areas, which is not quite the same thing as complete acceptance of this. And it's similar in many ways to Kosovo as well. Mike, the floor is yours.
Well, what they want to do is they want to freeze the losses what NATO wants is to freeze the losses to stop losing territory, to stop losing men and young people, old people, imported people, so that after a fair amount of time and rebuilding of Ukraine and rearming of Ukraine, they can seize those oblasts and seize Crimea at a time when the growth rate of Ukraine and Europe and a favorable administration in the U.S. would be able to win this war in a way that they cannot presently. This is why I always refer to this as what NATO is offering is a peacefire. It's a peace deal, ceasefire, but the emphasis is on fire. If you listen to Mike Pompeo's speech, for example, right before Ukraine launched its latest, deadliest attack on Russian territory, and Pompeo was asked, when do you think this war could end? And Pompeo made the argument that it'll never end. That even in a scenario of peace, Russia will still be the devil. Russia will still be the great menace to European security. And so even with a peace deal, we have to keep fighting the war. And of course, this is because what NATO wants is to keep seizing the assets. They want to seize the $75 trillion worth of natural resources in Russia. And Ukraine is a stop along that journey, but it's a very pivotal stop because of its geostrategic location. But I think what Russia wants is an agreement that Ukraine will not join NATO. What Russia wants is keeping at least large swaths of the territory that it has acquired militarily. Certainly, that will include Crimea. The idea that Russia could lose its only warm water port, I think, would be disastrous for Russia to give up. And I think they feel they have no need to give it up. Of course, the counterweight to this is NATO is building its biggest ever NATO base right on the Black Sea in Romania after what appeared to be a total coup of the Romanian government, annulling the first round election, indicting the populist candidate, Kenan Georgescu, who won that election, and then appearing to sabotage that entire election process through the courts, the same way the Brazil courts have been co-opted in that manner. But I think that NATO hopes that it can build up that military base in Romania, and it can fund this new European army that Germany and France are spearheading. I think they've already allocated billions of dollars to this new kind of European army concept, together with Mike, the renewed.
I'm looking at the clock and I realize I only have you for 2 more minutes. Just zoom out. Can we zoom out for a little bit here and say, the U.S. and Russia meeting a larger strategic agreement between the two of them, this hope that President Trump has spoken of pivoting Russia perhaps against China, breaking up the BRICS bloc. How much of a threat is this to the transatlantic access?
Well, it's an enormous one. The much of that transatlantic axis is now allied with China, and they don't want, I think, a Russia-China conflict. There's obviously Russia has been driven into China's arms because of all of this. The sanctions policy that the Obama administration led against Russian oil and gas and any trade between Europe and Russia since 2014, when the Obama State Department threw a hissy fit that Russia simply backed the faction of Ukraine that Obama isolated in a coup. But effectively, we blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. So Russia is now reconnecting all of its gas through the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline to China. So China is getting bargain basement discount prices on Russian gas that could have been cheap gas for Europeans. But the fact is there is a significant amount of benefit to an American-Russian partnership. In fact, even the Obama Hillary Clinton folks knew this coming into 2014 when Obama campaigned in 2012 on saying that the 1980s called. They want their foreign policy back when Mitt Romney accused Obama of being soft on Russia. You had Hillary Clinton doing business with Russia through Uranium One.
It's going to be absolutely historic. Mike Benz, where can people follow you, brother?
Follow me on X at Mike Benz Cyber, also on YouTube and Rumble.